A cold grey morning in mid-October. Courtroom 4 at the Franklin County Courthouse rang out with the first strike of the gavel. No one spoke loudly, no one laughed, but in the air one could almost smell prejudice. At the defendant's bench stood a silent 19-year-old black man, Jamal Carter, an oversized grey suit, a crooked collar, worn-out leather shoes that didn't quite match his thin frame and resolute eyes. But what captured the attention of the entire courtroom wasn't his appearance. It was his choice. He had declined legal counsel and decided to represent himself. Judge Linda Prescott, famously strict and not particularly patient with the overconfident, squinted down at the defendant through her gold-rimmed glasses. Her lips curled into a cold smile. "Mr. Carter, are you sure you don't want a real attorney? This isn't a high school debate club. This is a criminal trial. You're facing charges of vehicle theft and resisting law enforcement. This is serious." Whispers spread across the room like waves, raised eyebrows. Chuckles from the prosecution and pitying looks from those seated in the back row. Jamal remained standing tall. No retreat, no flinch. His voice was low but steady. "Your Honor, I understand the seriousness of this trial. I have reviewed all the evidence, and I believe I can defend myself." Prosecutor Richard Grayson, wearing an expensive suit, tie knotted as if straight from a textbook, let out a soft chuckle. He didn't need to say it. His eyes said it all. This kid's about to crash and burn. But Jamal hadn't come to persuade them. He had come to challenge everything they thought was certain. Prosecutor Richard Grayson wasted no time. He stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and turned to Judge Prescott. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls its first witness, Officer Henry Daniels, the arresting officer." A burly man in a police uniform stepped up to the witness stand. Broad shoulders, deep voice, steady gaze. An ideal figure in the eyes of the jury. A man presumed to be the embodiment of truth. Jamal quietly took notes. No reaction, no sarcasm, just an observation. Daniels testified that night around 9:15 p.m. "I received a report about a stolen black sedan. When I arrived at the scene, I saw the defendant leaning into the car holding something that looked like a lockpicking tool. When I identified myself as a police officer and ordered him to stop, he ran. I pursued and apprehended him." Around the courtroom, a few glances began to shift toward Jamal with suspicion. They heard the words "holding something ran pursued." It all sounded like a familiar tune, black, guilty, defiant. But Jamal stood up, and silence returned. The nervousness of a clumsy boy from earlier was gone. Only focus remained, like a glass cutter ready to make the first incision. Officer Daniels, Jamal, began, his eyes unwavering. "You said you saw me attempting to hotwire the vehicle. Could you describe exactly what you saw?" Daniels hesitated slightly. "I saw you leaning into the driver's seat. Seemed like you were messing with wires or holding something." Jamal nodded. "And how far were you from me?" "About 20 feet. Jamal was silent for a few seconds, long enough for the whole room to realize it wasn't a short distance. He requested permission to present evidence such as a color photo of the car's interior. Jamal held up the photo and asked Officer Daniels, "Could you point out where in this car the wires you claimed I was tampering with are located?" Daniels furrowed his brows, leaning closer to the image. "Inside the dashboard, below the steering wheel." "So that means they're not visible." From outside the car, Daniels was silent. Jamal turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, he claims he saw me tampering with wires from 6 meters away. In the dark, through a closed car door, with the wires entirely inside the dashboard." A strange quiet spread. No one spoke. But this time, the looks aimed at Jamal were no longer doubtful, but attentive. Prosecutor Grayson jumped up. "Objection." The witness testified based on his observation. Jamal didn't wait for the judge to intervene. "Your Honor," he said, eyes locked on Judge Prescott, "if this entire case relies on a physical observation, and that observation is physically impossible, then may I ask, what exactly is this justice system based on?" The judge didn't speak. She nodded slightly. "Objection overruled. Proceed, Mr. Carter." After Officer Daniels stepped down from the stand, Prosecutor Grayson did not back down. He straightened his tie, picked up a new file, and said, "Your Honor, the prosecution calls its next witness, Mrs. Margaret Jensen, the owner of the stolen vehicle. A middle-aged woman, hair tightly pinned up in a pearl-colored blazer, walked up to the witness stand. Her face was tense, but she couldn't hide the undercurrent of anger. The jury looked at her with sympathetic eyes, a victim whose car was stolen right in front of her house. A midnight theft, condemnable, seemingly obvious, but Jamal didn't see it that way. And he was ready. Mrs. Jensen testified. That night, I parked the car in front of my house like every day. The next morning, it was gone. I called the police, and later that afternoon, they found the car, with the defendant sitting inside. Jamal stood up and walked calmly toward the stand. Mrs. Jensen, may I ask, did you see anyone take your car? No. I was asleep. Was your car broken into, damaged, or tampered with in any way? No. Everything was intact. Jamal turned away and strolled before the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, a car said to be stolen in the night, but left untouched, no signs of forced entry, no damage, no evidence of intrusion. He turned back to Mrs. Jensen. If nothing was broken, how did the thief get into the car? Could it be they had a key? I don't know. Maybe. Please answer clearly. Who else has a key to the car besides you? Mrs. Jensen hesitated. Her gaze flickered. My husband and I. Just the two of us. No one in the courtroom reacted right away. But something shifted, slight but real. A theft with no sign of robbery. A car gone, but only people within the household had keys. A young black man was found in the car and was immediately branded a criminal. Jamal bowed his head politely. Thank you, Mrs. Jensen. No further questions. He returned to the defense table. But in truth, he had already begun his defense 5 minutes earlier. No one had noticed. The courtroom still buzzed lightly from Margaret Jensen's testimony. Prosecutor Grayson was preparing more files when Jamal's voice rose. Not loud but clear. Your Honor, I would like to call the next witness, Mr. Walter Jensen, Mrs. Jensen's husband. A wave of whispers swept the room. Grayson immediately stood and objected. Objection. This witness was not on the defendant's witness list. Jamal remained calm. Your Honor, Mr. Walter Jensen's testimony could provide critical context to the entire case. The prosecution has had ample time to investigate all individuals connected to the vehicle. Judge Prescott looked at Jamal, then turned to Grayson. She paused for 2 seconds, then nodded. Objection, overruled. Mr. Carter, call your witness. Mr. Walter Jensen stood tall, neatly dressed, but visibly tense. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at the prosecutor. Only a glance at Jamal mixed with hesitation and guilt. Jamal began, Mr. Jensen, do you own the black sedan, the vehicle in question? Yes. Do you have a key to the car? Yes. Did you lend the car to anyone on the night of the incident? Walter hesitated, glancing at his wife. Then he lowered his head, almost exhaled the words, I let my nephew borrow it. Alex, the boy needed it for a date. The courtroom seemed to lose all its air. Grayson froze. Several jurors turned to each other, completely stunned. Jamal didn't miss a beat. He continued, So you allowed Alex to borrow the car on the night it was reported stolen? Yes. And you didn't inform the police? Walter swallowed hard. I didn't think it was necessary. I assumed the car was returned and just parked somewhere else. Jamal turned toward the jury. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, the car was not stolen. It was borrowed, and the person confirming that is the legal owner himself. Yet I, a young black man found sitting in that car, was arrested like a thief, dragged in here, and treated like a criminal. Prosecutor Grayson stood, trying to regain control. Your Honor, even if the car was borrowed, the defendant had no right to use it. That is still unauthorized use of property. Jamal turned to the judge. Your Honor, if the entire charge of grand theft auto is built upon the premise that the car was stolen, then this testimony just demolished that premise. You cannot charge me with stealing a car. That was never stolen. A heavy silence filled the courtroom. Grayson breathed heavily. Judge Prescott leaned slightly into her chair, her pen slowing down, and in the jury box a middle-aged woman nodded ever so slightly. Seeing the momentum shift in Jamal's favor, Prosecutor Grayson played his strongest card. the evidence he believed would turn everything around. He took a deep breath, then looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution requests to present surveillance footage from a camera near the scene showing the defendant entering the vehicle on the night of the incident." All eyes in the courtroom turned toward the large screen. A video began playing, black and white, slightly blurry. A tall, slim figure in a dark hoodie approached a sedan, opened the door, and got inside. Grayson turned back, his voice tight with triumph. "This image matches the description of the defendant, Jamal Carter. 6 feet tall, slim build, dark clothing." The jury murmured. A few nodded. It seemed the case was about to close, but Jamal remained seated. No panic, no collapse. He simply stood up. He stepped forward to cross-examine the next witness, lead investigator Marcus Harris, who had analyzed the video. Detective Harris, Jamal began, "Were you at the scene that night?" "I reviewed footage from a store camera across the street." "Were you able to identify the face of the person in the video?" "No. The footage is too blurry, the face is obscured, but you still concluded that it was me." Harris looked momentarily uneasy. "Based on body type and clothing, there's a similarity." Jamal nodded. "Then I was asked to present further evidence, a still image from the video enlarged and printed." "Your Honor," Jamal said, holding it up, "this is a still frame from the video. Is the face clear or unclear?" Detective Harris examined it closely, then shook his head. "Unclear. So you cannot confirm that it's me, not with certainty?" "No." Jamal turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the video the prosecution calls damning evidence does not show a face. It has no definitive markers. And more importantly, it does not disprove the possibility that I simply approached a car I thought had been abandoned." The energy in the courtroom shifted suddenly. From certainty to reasonable doubt, from car thief to misidentified individual, Prosecutor Grayson sprang up. "Your Honor, this is speculation. The image may not show the face clearly, but it is still reasonable to conclude." Jamal raised his head, eyes fixed on Judge Prescott. "Your Honor, if a person can be convicted simply because their build matches a blurry shadow in a video, then is anyone in this courtroom truly safe under the law?" A heavy, contemplative silence fell. Judge Prescott didn't respond immediately, but the coldness in her eyes, once icy, now softened into reflection. At this point, Prosecutor Grayson looked like a man holding up a collapsing house. The video evidence hadn't landed as expected, and the jury drifted toward Jamal. But he still had one final weapon. "Your Honor, even if the vehicle wasn't stolen, the defendant fled the scene when ordered to stop by law enforcement. That fact is uncontested. That was resisting arrest, and Grayson knew if he could hold on to that charge, he could still win." Judge Prescott turned to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, I agree with Mr. Grayson. Regardless of the other issues, it is true that you ran. So how do you explain that?" The courtroom fell silent once more. Everyone waited for his response. Jamal took a deep breath, then raised his head. "Your Honor, to answer that, I would like to call the next witness, Alex Jensen, the person Mr. Walter identified as who borrowed the car that night." Again, murmurs spread throughout the room. A tall, slim young man in a wrinkled shirt stepped up to the stand. His face showed visible guilt and unease. Alex avoided eye contact with his aunt, Mrs. Margaret, as he walked past her. Jamal, calm but resolute, asked Alex, "On the night in question, you borrowed the black sedan from your uncle, correct?" "Yes." "And after your date, where did you park it? Near home?" "On a side street close to the old bakery." "Did you lock the car?" I left the key inside, closed the door but didn't lock it." "Why I feared that if I locked it, my uncle would know I'd borrowed it without asking." A few people in the courtroom gently shook their heads, but Jamal wasn't done. "Did you see anyone suspicious nearby when you left the car?" Alex hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. A man was standing not far away. He looked strange. I felt uneasy but assumed he was homeless and didn't say anything." Jamal turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to recount the events as no one has asked me to." His voice dropped lower. The entire room held its breath. That night I was walking home and saw a car parked at an odd angle, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. I thought someone had forgotten it, or maybe something had happened. I approached to check if there was a note or a phone number. Then I heard someone yelling behind me. A man in plain clothes came running toward me. No police, no badge, no explanation. I panicked, because I thought it was the same suspicious guy Alex saw earlier. I ran not from the police, but from a strange man charging at me in the dark. I didn't resist arrest. I was protecting myself. The courtroom was utterly still. Judge Prescott said nothing. Prosecutor Grayson closed his eyes, and one young juror who had been cold and impassive from the beginning nodded for the first time. Judge Prescott, now having set down her pen, looked directly at Jamal. "Mr. Carter, do you have any more witnesses?" Jamal stood up. His voice was clear yet humble. "Your Honor, I would like to call my final witness. That is, myself." A wave of surprise swept through the courtroom. A defendant calling himself to the stand brave or foolish. But as Jamal stepped forward, no one saw a naive young man anymore. He took the oath to tell the truth and began his testimony. "My name is Jamal Carter. I'm 19 years old. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't been trained in law. But I know when I've been wrongfully accused. That night, I was walking home after a shift at the car wash down the block. It was cold. I was tired. I just wanted to go home. Then I saw the car parked awkwardly, the door unlocked and the interior lights still blinking like someone had just left it in a rush. I thought maybe someone was in trouble. I approached to check. The keys were still in the ignition, and just as I leaned down, I heard someone shout behind me. It wasn't police. No badge, no uniform, just a strange man charging straight at me. I panicked. I ran. Because in my world, when you're a young black man and someone chases you at night, you don't stop to ask, "Who are you?" You run. Jamal paused. The room was so quiet that one could hear the ceiling fan turning. When I was arrested, I thought I was being mugged. I shouted, "Who are you?" but no one answered. No one explained. I was handcuffed, thrown in a car, taken away like a criminal. But I didn't steal anything. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't run from the police. I ran from someone I thought was about to hurt me. Jamal's voice began to rise, no longer just a testimony, but a voice for thousands like him. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but I had a mind. I read through all 400 pages of this case file. I borrowed law books from the library, studied every statute. Not to win, but to survive. I stand here today not to beg for pity. I want a chance to be seen for the truth. If I'm convicted just because my build matches a shadow in a blurry video, if I'm convicted simply because I was afraid and ran, then maybe in this society justice was never made for people like me. A strange silence settled over the courtroom. Judge Prescott leaned back in her chair. Prosecutor Grayson said nothing. One juror, an older man with graying hair, rubbed his eyes. No one clapped, no one cheered. But something filled the room, undeniably present, the truth. As Jamal finished speaking, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence, not for lack of words, but because no one dared to break the silence that had just fallen. Judge Prescott dipped her head slightly. She didn't say, "Thank you," as usual. She nodded a wordless acknowledgement. And then, Prosecutor Grayson stood. "I am no longer arrogant, though I am still trying to maintain a firm posture." He stepped into the center of the room, facing Jamal, who no longer felt like the defendant, but a citizen standing before the system trying to judge him. "Mr. Carter," Grayson began, "you speak very well, moving even. But this is not a stage for storytelling. This is a courtroom. And here we don't judge feelings, we judge actions." He turned to the jury. "Remember, this young man was found in a vehicle that wasn't his without permission and ran when police approached. No one made those facts up." Grayson turned back to Jamal, aiming for one final blow. "Mr. Carter, if you were truly innocent, why didn't you just stay and explain to Officer Daniels then and there? Why did you run?" That question, deceptively simple, was the very thing that had destroyed countless black lives. But Jamal didn't flinch. He looked directly at Grayson, not with anger or bitterness, just the gaze of someone who deeply understood something the prosecutor had never experienced. "I already answered you, but maybe you need to hear it again, not to understand, but to remember. Because that man didn't say, "I'm a police officer," because he wore plain clothes, no badge, no clear command, just shouting and footsteps chasing me through the dark. If you've never lived in a neighborhood where running might save your life, then maybe you won't understand. Jamal paused a beat, then turned to the jury, this time looking them directly in the eye. "I didn't run from the police. I ran from a strange man in the night who never told me who he was. If you believe I deserve to be convicted just for that, then convict me. But don't call it justice." The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Prosecutor Grayson stepped back. No further questions, no rebuttal. He returned to his table for the first time with nothing more to say. Judge Prescott looked at Jamal for a long moment. "Mr. Carter, thank you for your answer. You may return to your seat." Jamal nodded. He strolled back to the defendant's table step by step, as if knowing that each step was rewriting his history. Judge Linda Prescott sat up straight. Her voice rang out no longer stern, but measured as if weighing every word, every syllable. "Members of the jury, you have now heard all testimonies, all evidence, and all arguments from both sides. This is the moment for you to carry out the most sacred responsibility of any citizen in our justice system. No one can speak for you. No one may pressure you. The truth from this point on belongs to you." She paused briefly, then turned to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, do you have any final words before the jury begins deliberation?" Jamal stood. He didn't look at Grayson. He didn't look at the judge. He looked only at the jury. "I'm not asking for pity. I didn't come here to beg anyone to let me go. I came here to be heard, not because I'm special, but because too many like me have never been heard at all. If you believe I'm guilty, then find me guilty, but do so with understanding, not instinct. But if any part of you even for a moment believes I deserve to live free, then let true justice exist today." No one spoke. No one moved. Judge Prescott nodded. "We will recess. The jury will now retire to deliberate." Jamal sat down. He clasped his hands. He didn't pray. He didn't tremble. He simply waited. That night, Jamal didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because he knew his future and how the world viewed people like him could be decided by morning. In another room, 12 people talked, debated, compared notes. Not just about a case, but about belief, bias, and truth. The next morning, Franklin County Courthouse was packed. Reporters crowded outside. News cameras pointed toward the heavy wooden doors leading into the courtroom. Everyone knew this wasn't just a verdict day. Today was a judgment for an entire system. Jamal entered the courtroom, still wearing the same old grey suit, but he no longer walked like an accused boy. He walked like someone who had endured a battle, win or lose. He had stepped into his history. Judge Prescott appeared. She didn't read anything. She issued no warnings. She asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" A middle-aged man with graying hair, the foreperson, stood. "We have your honor. Please read the verdict." No one stirred. No one coughed. No phones rang. The whole world held its breath. The foreperson unfolded the paper. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed through the room. "On the grand theft auto charge, we find the defendant Jamal Carter not guilty." A collective exhale swept the courtroom. A woman covered her mouth. A reporter dropped his pen. But the foreperson wasn't done. "On the charge of resisting law enforcement, we find the defendant Jamal Carter not guilty." Applause erupted outside the courtroom. Inside, someone began to cry, and Jamal closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. Judge Prescott tapped her gavel lightly on the bench. "Order, order in the court." The room quieted again. She looked at Jamal, eyes no longer cold but deep like a riverbed. She stood, her voice steady. "Mr. Carter, you have been acquitted of both charges. You are free to leave this courtroom. But before you do—" She paused. All eyes turned to her. "I want to say what you demonstrated today was not just confidence. It was courage, intellect, and a belief in a justice system that we have too often forgotten. If anyone has ever made me believe that the law can be redefined from the defendant's chair, it is you. Consider studying law, Carter. We need people like you." Jamal stood still for a second, then he smiled for the first time during his longest life trial. I'll seriously consider that, Your Honor. Very seriously. The heavy wooden courtroom door creaked open. Midday sunlight spilled in, illuminating the face of Jamal Carter, who was no longer defendant Jamal, but the young man who had just defeated a verdict built on prejudice and negligence. Outside, dozens of reporters pointed their microphones at him. Jamal, did you not commit any crime? How does it feel to defend yourself and win? Do you plan to sue for wrongful arrest? Are you going to study law? Jamal didn't answer right away. He stood quietly at the courthouse steps, eyes lifted toward the open blue sky. A hand tapped his shoulder. He turned out to be Alex Jensen. The young man walked up, head-bowed voice, thick with guilt. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to take the fall for all of this. I should have said something from the beginning. Jamal placed a hand gently on his shoulder. You didn't put me on trial. The system did. And I believe today we made it look at itself. Alex nodded, his eyes red. He turned to walk away, then hesitated. So, after all this, what will you do next? Jamal didn't reply immediately. He looked around the ivory courthouse walls, his eyes filled with admiration and doubt, the cameras capturing every second. Then he answered slowly but surely. I think I'm going to college. Law school. If I could do all this without a degree, imagine what I could do with every tool in my hands. Alex smiled. You're going to change the world, Jamal. Jamal shook his head lightly, then smiled back. I don't need to change the whole world. I just want to ensure kids like me never have to stand alone at the defendant's table again. A gentle breeze swept across the courthouse steps. A 19-year-old black young man walked down empty-handed. No handcuffs, no lawyer, no guide. But each step he took was a step forward for justice. A quiet Tuesday morning. No sirens, no gavel strikes, no suspicious glances like those inside the courtroom. Just sunlight streaming through the library window of Eastwood College, where Jamal Carter now sat. Starting over. He wore a grey hoodie, his hair neatly trimmed, his hand turning the first page of the book Principles of Criminal Law in the United States. No longer studying to save himself. This time he studied to save others like him who were misunderstood, wrongfully arrested and condemned simply because they had no voice. A stack of enrollment forms was on the desk. Beside it, a freshly printed student ID card, Jamal D. Carter, School of Law, Class of 2025-2029. Pasted on the wall in front of him was a simple yet powerful quote from a renowned African-American judge: when justice doesn't come to you, learn how to go to it and claim it. Jamal read it a third time, then nodded. Not far off, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Alex Jensen, first day. Huh? I told my dad he still can't believe you pulled all that off without a lawyer. Jamal smiled faintly. He replied with one line, I didn't believe it either. But now I do. And it's not over. He stood, closed his book and slung his backpack over his shoulder. But before walking out, he turned to look again at the room where he had read his first line of law as a student, not a defendant. In his mind, his mother's voice echoed somewhere softly. Justice isn't always right, but don't let it stay wrong. Outside the library, the sun was shining. No cameras, no reporters, no jury, just a 19-year-old young man and a long road ahead. But this time, he wasn't stepping out to run. He was stepping into the world with a quiet, unshakable vow. If they won't let justice exist properly, then I'll learn how to build a better version.